press the right button, that would help. There we go. Right, and now I'll share my screen so you can see the slides. Perfect. That one. Okay. Lovely. Okay, so obviously anybody who watches the news, listens to the radio, reads the newspaper will obviously know that we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. And I think it's fair to say that's really beginning to have a bite and beginning to impact people, particularly people on lower incomes. But I think increasingly we're seeing more and more people, even those who are in employment and earning good money, you know, really beginning to struggle with things like energy bills. And you know what we're seeing is that some people are beginning to have to make hard decisions about whether they pay their energy bills or whether they compromise on other things. And that's something we particularly see in rural areas. We know sort of things are generally tougher in rural areas, and obviously much of East Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire are very, very rural. If you live in a rural area, it's harder to access services. You know, sometimes if you're reliant on public transport, that's not as great as it can be in an urban area. So, you know, I think what we're beginning to see happen is that people who have just been managing to stretch their money to pay everything are now becoming increasingly squeezed. And I think we think there might be some people who, as we head into this winter, are going to find themselves tipped into that point where they, you know, are becoming more vulnerable, more isolated. And, you know, that there's a real concern that, you know, if people are in that position, they then have to call on sort of more acute services, so hospitals and social care services. And obviously what we really want to be able to do is for people to live well in their own communities. So what's come about as a result of this is we're looking to establish warm hubs in East Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire this winter. And we've been able to do this thanks to some funding that's come through the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Integrated Care System South Place Partnership. And the South Place Partnership covers the East Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire part of the county. So that's where the funding's come from. They've passed that funding on to East Cambridgeshire District Council and South Cambridgeshire District Council, and they've commissioned us to help support these warm hubs. So just in summary, sort of warm hubs are really about encouraging people to leave their homes and come together to sort of assist each other, I guess, this winter. So just delving a little bit further into what a warm hub actually is, because it's a term that you might have seen used in a number of contexts. And I think it's something that a lot of community buildings perhaps have already turned their mind to. They're already beginning to think, well, what could we do to help our community? So some people are already coining the term. But for us, a warm hub is about any publicly accessible community building that can provide a free of charge, warm and friendly environment for people to come together, to socialise, to take part in activities. And we think that could be any kind of publicly accessible community building. So it might be a village hall or a community centre or a pavilion, but it could also be a church building, or it could be a day centre. We know there's lots of those already in our communities. So we're looking for any building that sort of falls into that category. That second point there is perhaps the most important part for us. These warm hubs are going to be run by volunteers, so it's very much a community-led enterprise. So although Cambridgeshire ACRE are going to be supporting the warm hubs, they very much will be led by their own community volunteers, and it'll be up to the community when they open and how long for. Whether that's mornings, afternoons, whole days, it'll be up to the community to decide what they can manage and obviously what their community need. In terms of what the hubs will provide, we think there's sort of a real sort of distinct list of things that they might do for their community. So one of those is providing refreshments, so hot drinks and biscuits and cakes perhaps to begin with. But then as you can see in this picture, which is a warm hub in another part of the country, you know, they could think about in future perhaps providing warm or hot meals. So soup and a roll is a real easy one, but some hubs we know in other parts of the country have deliver 3-course meals on a regular basis. So again, it could be very much up to the hub and up to what the attendees of the hub want from that hub. We're also thinking about social activities and information and advice that can be provided through the hubs. So, you know, we're thinking about help with things like how to stay warm at home, how to heat your home more efficiently, how to reduce your energy bills. And we're also thinking that through the hubs, we'll be able to put people in touch with other health and wellbeing services that might be able to support them. So helping them access grants and things like that, that will then help them be more comfortable in their own homes. Another thing that we see hubs doing is providing access to their electricity and their Wi-Fi. We're conscious that sometimes people might be having to cut back at home, perhaps having to stop their broadband contracts, things like that. So we're hoping that through the hub, people will be able to come along with their digital devices, charge them up and use the hall's Wi-Fi, the building's Wi-Fi. So if they need to get online to do any of the myriad of things we have to do these days online, so booking appointments or online banking, any of those things, then they'll obviously have access to the hall's Wi-Fi to be able to do that. And I think the point about the company of others is great, you know, because it's not just about, you know, these hubs are not just aimed at people who are in crisis or people who are really struggling with the cost of living. They're actually aimed at everybody. Any one of us could benefit from going to a warm hub this winter, I think, just for company with other people, you know, people who are home working. And perhaps if you are in the lucky position of you know, not having to struggle with your own bills, perhaps you can be the person who offers that support to other people as just a friendly face within the hub. So yeah, anyway, the hubs are, most importantly, again, hubs are open to everyone. We're not just aiming these hubs at a particular demographic. We're not just thinking they're just for old people or just for people who are in poverty. They're for everyone. So I think that's a really important to remember. And I think we're also hoping that hubs will evolve. I think each one will take its own sort of specific path, depending on the people who run it, of course, which might be yourselves, but also on the people who come along. You know, if your hub ends up being more of a sort of family-oriented hub, then that's great. Or if it ends up, you know, perhaps with an older audience, that's also good. The hubs are there for whoever needs it. So, but just so long as they're inclusive and you know, hopefully welcoming to everyone. Thinking about who else might be involved in warm hubs, we're working with a lot of other partners and trying to get a lot of other partners involved in warm hubs. And what we're hoping to do is to produce a menu, if you like, of services that warm hubs can call on, depending on the needs of the people who attend the hubs. So thinking back to my last point about, you know, if you end up with older people there or families there, they might have some quite specific needs that those people could do with some support on. And what we're hoping to do is, if we pull together this menu, then the people who run the hubs will be able to say, okay, who could we have come along who could support the people who are attending my hub? So if you've got a hub where a lot of the people who are coming along are struggling to heat their homes, then we're going to have some partners there who can help with accessing grant support, help with accessing, you know, household support funds, help with working out how to make your home more energy efficient, who can provide hot water bottles, you know, energy efficient light bulbs, all those sorts of things, and also activities that people might like to take part in. And I think that perhaps the point I've just sort of missed there is that obviously a real key thing for us is sort of health prevention services. This is really about trying to avoid people having to call on those more acute services this winter. So if there's anything we can do through the hubs that will sort of focus around health prevention and what people can do to look after themselves and their health better, then we'll try and make sure that happens as well. In terms of the support that Cambridgeshire ACRE will provide, as I say, we've been commissioned to support the development of these hubs. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to assess buildings' readiness to be a warm hub. As the name suggests, you know, we really need these hubs to run from places that are warm. So, you know, we hope we can find community buildings that aren't drafty, that have got good heating and that are comfortable for people to use, and also are a sort of a safe environment for people to use. So we'll be assessing things like health and safety and things like that, just so we can ensure that, you know, if a hub comes forward, we can be sure that it's a good place for people to visit. We'll also be helping you, if you choose to go ahead with this, with recruiting and training the volunteers who will support you in delivering the hub. We're hoping that all hubs will have a minimum of 3 volunteers, but obviously, the very best hubs are going to have a lovely, great big pool of volunteers to call on. So we'll help with trying to attract volunteers to come along and help you run the hubs. And then we've come up with a programme of training so that all hubs are sort of having a good baseline about how their hubs should be run, and help with sort of policies and other procedures, etc., that you might need to ensure that your hub runs well. One of the key things for us will be about marketing and promoting the hubs once they're set up, so that people know they're open and know that they can go along to them and that they're free of charge and that they're a place for everyone. So we're coming up with a promotional toolkit that we'll be rolling out to all our hubs, and that'll include things like banners and display boards, etc., so that it can be very clear that hubs are open, and there'll be a sort of a warm hub brand, if you like, that hopefully people will then start to recognise that it's a sort of an affiliated warm hub that's been through this process, and that it's a good place to go and visit. One of the key things about warm hubs and about this particular programme is that we can offer some funding to help cover the costs of community buildings that take part. We recognise that a lot of community buildings are charitable, and we certainly don't want you to have to bear the burden yourselves of covering those costs. So what we're asking anybody who's thinking of offering their building to be a warm hub is to think about what are the costs you would need covered. We do have a significant budget available to help cover those costs, but obviously we want to stretch that money as far as possible so we can have as many warm hubs available this winter as possible. So we're asking people to think carefully about what costs they might need help covering, and we'll look and see how we can help with those. Another key thing that we need to do with this is really to collect feedback from those who take part in the warm hubs. So that's the volunteers, obviously, who are running the warm hubs. We want to know about your experiences, but equally we want to know about the experiences of those who visit the hubs, because, as I say, this project is taking place in quite a sort of a discrete geographical area. What we want to be able to do, obviously, is show that these hubs have made a difference. Because we think then there is a chance that we could ask for this kind of programme to be funded in future, but we need to be able to prove that it works. I don't think we're in any doubt that it's much needed, and that this is the right strategy for empowering communities to really look after each other. But it'd be great if we've got some hard evidence to prove that. So we'll be as part of this, we'll be collecting some feedback. And as I say, what we're hoping is that all the warm hubs that come forward through this will follow this particular sort of journey, if you like, of affiliation. And once they've completed that, they'll then be affiliated to our network of warm hubs. And that means you're getting our support, the funding that's available, the marketing support, etc. And it means that hopefully people will start to recognise the warm hubs as a sort of a network, an entity, if you like, and they will trust them as a good place to visit and spend time. So if you're interested in hosting a warm hub, I think a lot of you, I'm very grateful to say, have already completed our expression of interest form. We've received, I think, over 30 expressions of interest so far across East Cambridgeshire and South Cambridgeshire, which has been totally overwhelming, and we're very grateful for those. The next step, over the next couple of weeks, myself and Lisa, who's on the call today, will be getting in touch with everyone who's expressed an interest, and we'll be working through a sort of an assessment checklist, we're calling it. Sounds more intense than it really is, but that's really just for us to assess your readiness to become a hub. And then obviously because so many people are interested, we might have to prioritise where we put our resources first, because we want the first hubs to be able to open their doors in October as it starts to get colder, but then we sort of foresee that there might be some other hubs that come online, come into being as over the next couple of months as well, so into November and into December. Once you've been through that assessment process, we're going to be setting up some training, which I talked about earlier, and it's going to be quite light touch training. We don't want that to be too onerous. We want to, we're being quite pragmatic about this. People are going to be sitting in cold homes this winter. We don't want that to happen. We want to have places that they can come to be warm and to be with other people. So for us, that's the most important thing, is that we get you to the point where you can open your warm hub as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible as well. What I'm going to do after today's meeting is I will circulate the recording of this session. I'll also recirculate the link to the expression of interest form as well, so that if you haven't already put in an expression of interest and you would like to, you have the link to be able to do that. Also, I'll circulate these slides as well as within that email, and you can see on there Lisa and my contact details if you need to speak to us. But as I say, if you follow the process, which is putting in your expression of interest form, we'll then contact you. And I think I'll stop there, and we'll take any questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Alison. That was you got through a lot of information in a short time there, so well done. Questions? I'm sure you've all got. I can see one lady already got her hand up. I've got you. You've got Paul on your.
I know, it's my husband and myself. I'm the secretary, he's the chairman. But I've got two very
Kingston Village Hall.
Kingston Village Hall. I've got two very quick questions. One is, how often in the week do you envisage these hubs to be open? And the second question is, if we offered lunches, we do coffee mornings weekly, which is fine, but is there a problem with serving lunches with sort of health and safety nowadays? Years ago we used to have lunches and things like that, but nowadays there's such a sort of strict thing that you presumably would have to cook in the hall. But is there a problem with serving lunches or not?
Well, should we take what your first question was, when it opens? What should I take that one first, and then we'll go on to the lunches one. So when it opens is down to the community, really. Obviously, you'll need to assess your community, down to needs, down to the community, down to how many volunteer hours you've got to give. All those things obviously have to be balanced out within a community. In some places, there might be one or two venues that might open on different days. If it's a bigger venue, if it's a small village, it might be you just do a morning or an afternoon once a week. That's fine. So it really is down to yourselves and down to that community, to what's needed and what can be achieved within the resources you've got. On the food front, Lisa, do you want to answer that? I'm sure you've had many questions about the kitchens in Village Hall, so do you want to answer that?
So I think that the short answer is we can work with you to get to that point of preparing and delivering lunches to the community, and we can work with the local authority to make sure that the space that you're providing is adequate and that you're meeting all the environmental factors that you need to meet within your location. And we can also point you in the direction of information on the Food Standard Agency's website, because obviously you'll need to be aware of allergens and making sure that the people who are attending your session are protected from that point of view. So short answer is we can work with you to make sure that you get to where you want to be for delivering hot food within your warm hub.
Yeah, and we've already asked the councils, haven't we, to support?
Yeah, we have. And just to add to that, we've also got funding. So if we need one person from each hub who's actually been through food hygiene training, then we've also got funding to help volunteers undertake that. It's an online course. It's a very simple course, but it would provide you with some confidence about that food hygiene aspect. So we can help volunteers with that as well.
Yeah. So it's not unsurmountable, but obviously we need to follow legislation, as you rightly say, to make it safe for people and for the youth providing it. I've got a gentleman down the bottom.
Sorry, is that me?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
I'm down as Natalie, but you're not Natalie. Well, two questions really. One is, we believe in building on existing structures and systems. And in our village, Haddenham, we've got 6 organisations who are really enthusiastic about being part of this. We haven't really got a proper functioning community hub as such at the moment, but that could develop over time. But we have got six charities and churches with halls who've already got volunteers who already offer things, and they'd be willing to open up for one different day of the week, so we could cover Monday to Saturday. So I guess my question is it possible to make, instead of 6 separate bids, is it possible to actually make a bid as a network of 6 spaces? I know it's more difficult perhaps to coordinate, you know, but building on what we already have, but bearing in mind, you know, we've got to get moving quite quickly. Is it possible to have a network bid as opposed to?
As long as you're working together, we'll probably have to adjust a little bit what we were going to do for one, obviously, but I mean, we're flexible as a community organisation, because I know these things occur, not one community is ever the same, but we would have to assess the space, so it would be the building would need to be assessed.
And my second, thank you. That's good to hear.
But you would need to organise it yourself in your community, because obviously we wouldn't be able to organise 6 different people to come together. We just wouldn't have time to do that. But if you're doing that at your community level and you're all agreed, that's good. If you're one group, that's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. And sorry if I can make just a second question. I think there's an image about this that in fact community hubs are for older people, a bit like myself, I guess. And that's right. And there are going to be, and there are already a lot of really challenged people on their own or in families at home. But I think it's just sort of widening the image of the people who may come, because there are lots of dads and mums looking after children at home who also are going to be very challenged. There are also a lot of young people in our village, for example, at about 3:30, who get off the coaches from the secondary schools, the latchkey kids who go home to cold homes where mum and dad may not be, where there is no food. And it's actually, and what we're looking at in our village, and it goes back to your previous question of how long should we be open? Well, I think we should consider perhaps the needs also of those young people who may need somewhere like a homework club, the possibility of coming along, you know, later in the day. And I think we should be covering their needs as well. So you're right, and Alison has made this point. There's a whole range of different groups of people. Let's not, you know, stereotype that it's just going to be the older people who need to be provided for. You know, we've got to provide, haven't we, for people of all ages, backgrounds.
I totally agree. And Alison made the point in her. We totally agree with you. It's just that people tend to stereotype it to older people, but this is about everyone. And actually, younger families, people who've dropped their children at school, you know, one around that time, around the school sort of gate time, and providing breakfast, all of that I think that's what you can probably consider in your community, to what infrastructure you've got there, what community you've got, and what you think's best for your community. What I would say about children, we would have to look at that, because obviously minors coming to a hall, there are other legislations and things we need to look at, which we haven't covered in this programme. Unaccompanied children, we haven't covered that. I'm not saying it's unsurmountable, but we would have to look at that.
Yeah, we're certainly looking at it as a Friends of Haddenham Library. And just going back to the food, by the way, we've contacted 2 of the food providers in the village who actually, at the end of the day, often throw away an awful lot of unserved hot food. And we're in contact with our food bank over this, to what extent that, you know, that unused food, I don't mean waste food, I mean sausages and veg and things which are thrown away, which we're going to try and get in containers and actually put in a centralised freezer or fridge for villagers, also as an extension of the food bank. But, you know, it's exciting, but isn't it an awful shame that we have to do this? But I think it's an exciting opportunity, and thank you for all of you involved in it. Well done, it's brilliant. I like the presentation.
No, I agree. It is a sad situation that we're having to do this. But I suppose what is so heartening is people like yourself that have already done quite a lot of self-organising within your own thinking within your own community to what you can actually do. So that, you know, we're here to support that and be flexible. What I've learned working with communities, you never get one the same or one volunteer the same. So you have to go with what's there, and we're here to work with what is right for you in your community. I'd like to really get that message across. And it's
Yeah.
not just about old people. We have had a lot of the media tends to be presenting sort of old people side of it, but it isn't old people, it's all ages. It could be any of us that could you know, fall ill and have to go there, couldn't we? So yeah, it could be anybody. It's not just people picked out of the community. So okay, any other questions? I think we've got some in the chat. We've got 2 hands up. I can see, is it Ellie?
Yes, hi. I just like your opinion, really. We discussed this at our last trustees meeting, and we're actually a day centre that runs 5 days a week. So we are ideal because we're already heating the building. We've already got staff and volunteers on the premises. Just a bit of advice really about, we currently, our members that come here, they have the entertainment, activities, whatever we do with them, and they have their lunch, teas, coffees, teas, cakes, whatever. And there is a charge for that. How do we balance that if we're bringing in people because they can't afford the fuel bills? So we can't really say, okay, this is what you're going to pay for your lunch, the same as everybody else. Has anybody thought around the balance of that sort of thing?
It would be an issue because obviously we are saying these are free, so I don't think we can charge, because the whole idea is people are free to come in the circumstances they're in. There have been schemes where some people pay, some people don't, but that might not be fair, because you could have some people paying but actually they can't really afford it, but they pay anyway. We would have to work with you, I think, on what money we've got and how we might work through that situation. When you say it's a day centre, obviously it's older. Is it older people at the moment?
Older people.
Where are you based?
We're in Burwell.
Burwell, so it's older people. So would you be widening that out to sort of more generations, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also we were talking to some other day centres, and actually older people haven't returned after the COVID. They're too frightened to go there. So, you know, if this would give anyone in the community a bit more confidence to come out as well, that might help with this as well, if we can make it more affiliated. So yeah, I think we work with you on an individual basis. This really does show, doesn't it, the difference between different projects and different communities, but it's not unsurmountable, I don't think.
Yeah, so this is what we're looking at, is it being a free service.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, if we're then saying to our members, actually, you've been paying for this all through, and now you don't have to.
Yeah. You might need to do, I don't know, 1 day free or something. It would have to be thought through to fit, I think, this.
Okay.
Is it not possible to have like a loyalty card? We were talking with the church about this, a bit like when you go in coffee shops, you know, that those who are particularly in need could actually have that sort of loyalty card. Because what you don't want to do is actually label people as, you know, in a particular way, a negative, positive way. That might be something worth exploring. I don't know. That there are those who do pay, and there are those perhaps who.
Yeah. I quite agree. You don't want to sort of you know, single someone out who's not paying. That's the worst thing. Everybody's got to be on an even thing, haven't they? Yeah. But yeah, loyalty card, because like, actually someone else mentioned that to me. It's something we can look at. Graham.
Thank you. And it's a question really around the funding parts of it, in terms of what will you fund? We had a trustee meeting last night, and people were generally supportive of it. The concern was over, with the cost of oil, extending the hours that it's going to be open at our coldest time, which is something we want to do. But how will we, if you like, define a budget of what we're going to look for you to cover as far as that's concerned? And then in terms of providing food, we've already got a level 2 kitchen, which is sort of looked after by East Cambs. We just need to have a further visit if we want to do hot food, which is fine. You know, we've already had a discussion with them, and we have someone who's level 3, level 4 who oversees us. So we're comfortable with that side of it, and being able to provide things like soup and a roll. But if we're going to do this for free, obviously we've then got to buy the consumables to make it up.
Yeah.
And the third is I took note particularly of the fact of, if you like, some form of entertainment, I call it that, social activities, and what will be allowed, if you like, within the funding regime. So, for example, we're working with Forever Active, which is a Cambridgeshire charity that does exercise for primarily elderly people, but no, it does expand out. Would we be able to extend our offering from those? Because at the moment there is a charge for that when people come along. Would we be able to sort of have a discussion with them around doing something which is more inclusive and at nil cost to those who are attending? Because of course, if people are exercising, one, it's good for them, it's good for their health, it's good for their well-being, it gets them warm. And there's a whole lot of positives around it. So I suppose in general, my question is, what's in and what's out as far as the funding stream is concerned? You said that it's a very generous allocation, but obviously you want to spread it thinly across everyone.
Do you want to answer that, Alison?
Yeah, I can do. So, I mean, obviously, I guess the most significant thing, as you say, is probably your increased heating costs and sort of lighting and people using your electric. So we want halls to think about how much you would need, say, a sort of per hour figure in order to cover that. And you should be able to, most community buildings would know how much they're, they normally have a sort of a hiring rate. So they would sort of have a rough idea, I suggest, of what that figure needs to be. But obviously, you just need to bear in mind that your own bills are likely to be going up even further this year. So just have that in mind. I think the other things that we do have is we do have money for activities and support. So, for example, as I say, we talked about this menu of things that we might be able to offer. So we may well have partners in this who have got things that might be of interest, who, for example, they might be being funded by somebody who's expecting them to hit particular targets of numbers of people they get involved. So we're hoping that there may be things that you can call on that will actually be free to the hub because they're being funded by somebody else. But we do have some money set aside. So if there are particular things you want, we can work with you to access those and we can potentially subsidise some of them. It might not be, a permanent subsidy, but it might be sort of like, some taster sessions or something like that. And the other thing, just to say, we have got some money for is for helping people attend the hubs who might have some accessibility issues. So, for example, if you have, people who want to come along who need particular sorts of, cutlery or mugs or things like that, that would just, perhaps your building doesn't have the things that those people need to make their experience a good one. We do have a small amount of funding that would be available to help with things like that, because we do want to make sure there's no barriers to people taking part. So those are sort of the main things we've got funding for. But yeah, I think the other thing you were saying about obviously the increase of cost if you're going to deliver food and that, what we're hoping is there might be some spin-offs from this as well, and that we can potentially get other partners involved. So for example, if you're in a community that's got a local co-op shop, we know that the co-op are very good at supporting community projects. So, we might be able to lever in support from those either through provision of supplies or through grant support. So I think it's, once we know where the hubs are, once you're set up, once you're running, once you've got your doors open, once you begin to understand what people want, we can then work with you. I say we've got 2 warm hub coordinators who will be able to work with you to sort of then say, okay, so what do you need next and how can we help you get that? That's what we're very keen to see happen.
Lovely. Thank you.
I mean, what we do say always is that no volunteers or should be out of pocket by the work they do. So yeah, it comes down to even buying the coffee and the biscuits. We will be able to provide the funding for that to happen. No one should be out of pocket to stop them volunteering. Any other yeah, Anita.
Hi, sorry, I've got 2 questions. One is there a deadline for the expressions of interest form? Because I am the chair of Whaddon Village Hall and we have our trustees meeting next week. So I was coming to this presentation today to deliver the information to the trustees. But I think in our situation, we we are quite an affluent village, I would suggest, and I think we would need to canvass the interest from the villagers in the first instance before we put an expression of interest
Right, okay.
in.
Yeah.
So is there a deadline for that, first of all?
We haven't set a deadline because we were just waiting to see what happened. As it's happened, we've had many responses. So I would say carry on with what you're doing. Speak to your village hall committee. If you want to speak to your community, speak to your community. But then after that, obviously get it in if you wanted to, as soon as you can do so. What I would say about communities looking affluent, there's always, that's a bit of a myth in rural areas, because actually there's always people that are struggling and are not so affluent. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell just asking people. They might not come forward in that way.
Yeah. And my second question was that you following on from you saying that you will have kind of a community of warm hubs. So if, for instance, Whaddon was a successful applicant and we became a warm hub, would we have kind of a catchment area of people that could attend our warm hub that weren't residents of Whaddon? Would you expect this community of warm hubs to cover the whole of the district?
Not the district, no, it's quite local, so local to Whaddon.
Right.
There might be, I don't know, some community villages and parishes have quite strong affiliations to ones next door. Yeah. In different sort of circumstances. So if that was the case, you might, Whaddon might be the service centre for the two villages next door, so they might automatically come there anyway. So it's difficult with rural areas because the pattern of how the things interlate is all very random. So we wouldn't, I don't think you would stop someone, you wouldn't say, oh, you must have a Whaddon address to come here. But obviously we would expect it to be in the local area, because people are not going to afford to travel a long way to go to a warm hub. If they can, it would probably be, why would they be driving that far to go to a warm hub? So
yeah, lovely, thank you.
I think we have got something in the chat. We have a community hall that is only accessible at present by our sheltered householders who South Cam pay for. Who were to use this facility? Who should we talk to? South Cams. What shelter time? We could speak to South. Where is that?
Grantchester is
Grantchester. Well, we can definitely speak to South Cams, can't we, Alice? Because they're partner in this, and find out, because actually they did mention their community rooms, didn't they, South Cams? So find out whether that can be opened and how that might happen. So we could definitely help that and come back to you, Leslie.
Okay, and the second part of that was the sheltered housing residents actually pay South Cams for this at the moment. So
it's part of their kind of
yeah, so it's a slightly odd one that we'd want to open it up to the whole of the village, but some of the sheltered housing residents might feel a bit aggrieved that something they're currently paying for is then made free to everybody. So would South Cams be prepared to refund? I think we'd have to ask South Cams about that, because I could understand they might feel a bit difficult with the people paying for it. We can definitely ask, because they definitely mentioned that they did have those kind of facilities across the community, and see what they say, and obviously we'll come back to you. Great, thank you. There's Grantchester there. Grantchester. Yeah, I'm on Grantchester's parish council. Okay, yeah, we can ask. And there is a village hall at Grantchester. There's a village hall, there's a reading room, and there's the communal hall. So there's three buildings. Yeah. But the communal hall is the most obviously sensible one, because it's right in the middle of the most densely populated area. Yeah. Okay. Have we got any other questions or observations or anything else? Madeleine? I think you've got it. That's it. You're unmuted now.
Is this meant to be a long-term project? Is this meant to just continue after the winter? Is it we've done it for this winter, and then obviously we'll assess and evaluate it. I don't think it'll be quite the same in the summer. No. However, if we listen to our people at the project leasing is going ahead,
they say next week winter could be even worse. So you know, I don't think the economy of the country is going to obviously we're getting a lot of promises, aren't we, with changes in bills and caps and all this, but I think, and from our experience, people probably need this next winter as well, sadly.
Yeah.
It's not gonna right itself overnight, I don't think. So yeah, we would see that it would be something we get set this year. If it works well and it's effective and it's successful, then there's no reason why we might, you know, there's no reason not to carry on next winter.
No, but it wouldn't carry on through the summer.
I don't think we've intended it to carry on through the summer, because I think it would, because it's something about warm hub, and I think it would be something different. We could assess need at that time and see, might be something different in the summer.
And if people are like we are in Eccleton, Hinxton is nearby, if people wanted to come from a nearby village, would it be up to them to get themselves here, or would we be expected to provide transport? Would that be part of?
We're not asking you to provide transport yourself, because there's obviously difficulties around that, but maybe there might be community transport, and we do have some money in the budget to pay for people's transport. Again, if it's the next door village and it's the only hub, that's fine, but if they were travelling across the county or something to see their friends in a long one, we obviously couldn't pay for that. So yeah.
Thank you.
Graham?
Yeah, it's just, I'm very comfortable with everything you spoke about, and we feel we're well positioned. My only concern is around the menu of community advice and support services, because that's obviously a very specialist type area, and some of the things are going to be very personal to the individuals. So could you just explain a bit more what the expectation is around that part, please?
Right. Yeah. So as part of the training, so this is why it's important to do volunteer training, we will cover what sort of support and advice is available, and a lot of that will be referral. So if you speak to someone and they say, "Oh, this," we can then refer them. So there will be referrals more than anything, rather than we're expecting you as a volunteer to give that in-depth support to someone, because obviously you're not, none qualified to do that. So it'll be a referral system. There will also be partners that may come into the hubs, and we're particularly thinking of ones on energy advice in the home, or cooking things more efficiently and that kind of thing, that could come and be available to give talks, give presentations. However, that if it's a personal thing, so if it's an individual's needs support, that's more a referral situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, Natalie, I think.
Robin again.
Robin.
I've just, this challenging thing that we keep coming back to about if there's enough funding to make it free for everyone, bearing in mind there's some centres who are already charging. It's quite interesting. Over the summer, we were in Whitstable, in the Whitstable Umbrella Centre, which is a community centre there. They're quite clear about this, where they have a sign when you go in which says, you know, come on in, have what you like to eat and drink, and pay if you're able to, but don't worry if you can't. And they actually managed to cover the costs by people who actually do contribute more than they've actually had, which covers the cost of those who don't pay. And I just wonder whether there's something there in the long run. Because I think, excuse me one moment, someone knocking at the door, but it may well be, you know, if we're thinking long term and the lessons that we learn as community centres about going forward, that might be a way of doing it. I'm just going to have to leave now.
All right, yeah, it's a good point. We'll wait for you to come back.
I think it's my Latin kid coming home from school. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think it's a good point Robin made there about, I think we need to learn and look a bit more into this payment element of it, and you know, how we manage that so everybody can access the hubs. Graham, did you have your?
It was just a comment in relation to that. At the moment, when we run our coffee morning, we do it on the basis of donations. We don't say what it should be or anything. And for health hygiene reasons, we actually have the donation box away from where we supply the tea and coffee.
Yes.
Because the authorities don't like you touching money and dealing with foodstuffs, which I get. And in that way, people aren't embarrassed or feel obligated as to what they put in. And we know that some people literally put in a few pennies and others put in a few pound. But we do it through donations. We don't put any price up. We don't even have suggested donations, which I know is what some people do. And that sort of works for us. So we regard it as a free service, and it's just putting the things in that way.
Yeah. I think for the moment we need to regard this as a free initiative to start with, but as it moves along, rightly say, we can look at other models of how it might fund or how people might contribute. We are thinking a bit on the hoof on some of these things, because obviously I've done this very quickly, and everyone has mobilised this very quickly. So these things it's why it's good to speak to you, because things are coming out we need to do more thinking about as we go forward, and as we learn, as we set the first ones up.
One of the other things that we've started to do is we've started to collect things like jigsaws, which we're going to make available for people to come who are going to come along. And
yes.
And we're also looking at the types of chairs that we've got, because there's a difference in someone popping in for an hour and sitting on a plastic chair, but someone coming in and sitting there for a few hours. I wouldn't want to sit on one of those chairs for that length of time.
Yeah. It's funny that's come up a bit, and I must admit I've sat on a few village hall chairs and they're an hour and you want to stand up. So
that's right.
Yeah. I think they haven't got the best of chairs, some of these places. And if you
it's about just sharing it, so it's a matter of broadening out, but thinking what's already out there and what you can do to pull it back.
I suppose the day centres are probably more, they seem to have nice chairs in day centres, don't they? So they're probably more equipped in that way for it. Any other thoughts or questions? Madeleine?
Are we thinking about any concerns about COVID or flu this winter?
Yes. So obviously we would follow procedures that are in place now in hand sanitising. I don't know if you're still doing that at your halls, and probably not getting people packed in too much. And if somebody did have flu, or asking them not to, or COVID not to attend there, if any government guidelines come up, we would follow those as well. Obviously we've been advising, or Lisa has very active through the pandemic, advising halls on all of this, and changes by the day. So we would have to be on top of that and making sure we're advising you. There is a risk, obviously it would all be shut down again, and you'd have people who can't eat their homes then shut down in their homes. That is a huge risk, I think, for this country. So at the moment we're going ahead. If COVID came back, or we'll do what we have to do at that point to try and make it legislation and abide by that, and safe for people to attend. And we would definitely get that information out to the hubs. That's why this collectively is a better way to do it, because we can get that information out to you all quickly if something changed. Anita?
I was just going to come in on that. So I work for the Integrated Care System, so one of the funders that are working on this, and it's something we are a little bit concerned about, in the sense of, are we creating these lovely warm places for germs to grow as well, which is a terrible way of thinking about it, and it is hugely a side issue. It is just something that we are mindful of, and I wanted to reassure people that we are looking at that. Nationally, around warm spaces, it is things like having a filtering system in, which could be something this project could also help all the spaces to upgrade to. Some already have, I know. But and it will just mean that we're not at a time when we're trying to keep infection rates low, just simple winter flu, that we're not creating a kind of a place that's going to make that worse. But I just wanted to add that this is something that is running through our minds, and we've got some experts locally looking at it.
Yeah, I know we've spoken to you about filters and things. I think the thing with it is we need to keep ahead of what's going on, don't we, with yourselves, and if there is anything going to change, let the hubs know quickly, or put in there what we need to do that. But let's hope, I know probably flu does go up in the winter, but let's hope we can keep on going with them. Graham?
Are you going to have a sort of a warm hubs website or something that we can all easily access? Because that's a simple way to do it.
Yes, we would have a warm hubs. Well, it's not really a website, a Facebook page, which virtually they act as websites now, because that's easiest to set up, and we can actually put the dates of the warm hubs on there. So we're working with the marketing people that support us, and they're going to set that up. We also obviously have the Cambridgeshire ACRE website, we have the Cambridgeshire ACRE social media, we have direct email to you all, so we would have you in a group so we can directly email you quickly if we needed to. It would all be supported in that way, the communications.
That presupposes, of course, that we're on Facebook.
If you're not on Facebook, I to be honest, the best way we can communicate is direct email, I think, because people get the message. We've got on our system, we can see who opens things, and amazing how many people don't open any of it. So actually, we know people open direct emails. So I think that's the best way to do it if we needed to get a message across to you.
It's not only about getting messages; it's also about resources. Which is what in the old days, that's what I'm used to sort of accessing through a website as opposed to Facebook.
Yes.
Problem with Facebook, I find, is that it can disappear, and you've seen it on there somewhere, but it's then disappeared up. Whereas on a website, you know where the resources are, and you can go and look at where your lists are and other things.
So I could just come in on that, Graham, just to say, as part of the volunteer training, we are developing a volunteer handbook, and that will have a lot of useful information in it. It'll also have a number of templates and policies, procedures, etc., that we think might be useful to the hubs. So everybody who volunteers will get a copy of that. But yeah, as Kirsten says, if there's any updates, obviously we can then circulate those by email. And yeah, you're right, we can easily put a page into our existing website where people can download resources from. So that's not a problem at all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I don't know if anyone's members of Cambridgeshire ACRE on here. Some of you will be village halls. Well, we have like an inkling of that works really well. So yeah, there's also, we can put things on that as well. Leslie, did you have another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to check up on the comment that you might pay for a filtering system. The reading room that we have in the village is quite small, and the ventilation is very bad there, which is why I haven't thought of it for this purpose. But if you would actually pay for filtration and maybe even for COVID tests before people go in, that would be very promising. But would it not be pretty expensive? The other thing is it's a listed building, so can they be put into listed buildings?
I think they're mobile, from what I understand. I've only seen one when I've been to my dentist. They seem to have them mobile there, so I'm not very aware, only at the dentist, but I'd imagine they're mobile. We need to look into it, because I really don't know the price of those and whether there'd be enough.
There's certainly not money within the existing project for that. That's not something we budgeted for when South Cambridgeshire and East Cambridgeshire commission the service from us. But if it's something that we, collectively as partners decide that that's the way to go, then, we would obviously have the conversation about whether some funding could be found to support those. But I mean, they are a number of thousands of pounds each. So it would be, looking at the number of potential hubs we might have, it would be a challenge. So
yeah, and I suppose there's filters in them and maintaining them. It's not as easy as just putting it there. That's what we'd have to look at. Yeah. But yeah, we will look at it, because I think it's something to look at a possibility of in especially smaller spaces. I don't know whether, have you got any other questions, Leslie? Is that
No, I'm lowering the hand.
You're lowering yours. Graham?
No.
No. Okay, I just checked the chat. I think we've been I think we've covered everything there. And we're coming to just 2 minutes to the end. So I want to thank you all for taking part. It's been a really good discussion and really useful to us because it's brought up things we need to think about going forward. Hopefully it's given you more of an insight into the idea of the hubs, what you may need to do in your communities, and what you now need to, if you wish to continue to go forward, what you need to do, and that is to put in the expression of interest form. We don't have a closing date. Just if you're going to put it in, just put it in as you can, and from that we'll be in touch with you to do the assessment of the building or the place you're and you'll sort of talk to you about your group and assess how much funding you need to undertake your hub. I think I've covered everything. Alison and Lisa, is there anything that I haven't covered that we need to do now? There will be an email coming out, won't there? We'll have this recording on.
Email will come out tomorrow morning now. So. Yeah,
so I'll have this recording and the slides, so you can share that with others in your group or your community. That might be helpful. Brilliant. And in the meantime, if anyone goes away and thinks, oh, I've just thought of that and I didn't ask it, please do get in touch and we'll be able to answer it individually after this meeting. So I don't think I've got anything else to say now. So just thank you for all your enthusiasm and actually self-organising you've already done in your own communities. That's absolutely really great. So thank you, and yeah, we hope to see you soon at a warm hub in the future.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.